guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Simmons DA50. Today we will be doing some sound demo of the Simmons DA50. This video is the part 2 of my unboxing of the Simmons DA50. So if you haven't checked my first video, I will put a link on the description box below so you can check the full specs of the DA50 drum amps. Okay, today we are going to do some sound demo. At the same time, we are going to learn on how to properly EQ your eardrums using drum amps. Okay, please note that I am not a professional or an expert drummer. I am new to this drum because we just got this drum like a couple of months ago, and this drum is for my son. So me and my son is totally brand new with the drums. So since I'm a beginner, I did some research and learned some new stuff. So I just want to share what I've learned from my research. Okay, so hopefully you guys will learn something too on how to properly EQ your drums. So let's start. The Simmons DA50, it has a 3 EQ band: the low, the mid, and the high EQ controls. This EQ controls, it controls the overall tone of the drum amps. Okay, professionally, each parts of the drums has an EQ settings, okay, such as your kick drum, your snare, and so on. So they have their own individual EQ settings. But since we are not EQing all the drum parts, because we're just using like a standard drum amp with just 3 EQ band, so there's no way for us to EQ all the drums instruments. Please note that there's no specific or exact settings on how to EQ your drums. The reason why is there's different kinds of drums, there's different kinds of amplifiers, and the location where your drum is, this can all affect your EQ settings. So there's really no exact settings or formula on how to EQ your drum set. Okay, so I did some basic research on how to EQ your drum set. So upon my research, there are some basic frequency settings that we can use to properly EQ your drums. Since we are not EQing each parts of the drum set, we need to break the drum set into 3 groups. Now, group 1. The group 1 would be the low frequency. So what's your low frequency? So your low frequency will be your kick and your floor toms. Group number 2 will be your toms, and your snare as well is part of the midtones. Okay, group number 3, the high frequency. So your high frequency are your hi-hats and your cymbals. After we break the drum set into 3 groups, we need to focus on the most important instruments from those 3 groups. Okay, from the group 1, the most common one would be your kick. From group 2, the most common one would be the snare. the third group, the most common one will be your hi-hat. Okay? Okay, so why should we focus on those three instruments? Well, if you listen to a song, like any songs, 90 to 99% of the drum track, if you listen to it, these are the most commonly used instrument on drums. Your kick, your snare, and your hi-hat. Okay? Okay, so let's start EQing. Okay, step 1. Set your drum module to the default settings. Okay, so for my electronic drum, which is the Roland TD17, so let's set the module into the default settings. Okay, for this drum module Roland TD17, the default settings for bass would be on 12 o'clock. Okay, and then the same thing with the treble, and then the volume control, I'm just gonna set it to at least 50%. Okay, because I'm just here in my small room. My room is like 10 by 10, so 50% is good enough. Okay, for the drum kit, I'm just gonna be using a acoustic all wood, which is the kit 01 for this drum module. Okay, after I set up the default settings, I'm just gonna add a little bit of bass. Okay, and then also a little bit of treble. The reason why I'm just adding just a little bit, so that the sound of the electronic drums is not that too flat. Okay, so we just need to add a little bit of bass and treble. Okay, so this is gonna be my default settings for these electronic drums, so I'm just gonna leave it this way. Okay, after you set up your electronic drums to default settings, let's go to the drum amps and set it up to the default settings. Okay, so the default settings for these electronic drums will be same thing, the 12 o'clock location. Okay, so low is on 12, mid is on 12, and high will be on 12 also. Okay, after we set everything into defaults, we will be EQing each sections from low, mid, and high EQs. Okay, step 2, know your drum amp EQ frequency default settings. Okay, it is very important for you to know the exact frequency default settings for each band, because it's gonna be easier for you to do some adjustment when you do some EQing. Okay, so check your owner's manual for your drum amp, so you know exactly what your frequency for each band. Okay, for this Simmons DA50, the low EQ at centered default settings, the frequency is set at 60 Hertz with a positive and negative decibels sweep. Okay, Okay, upon my research, the recommended frequency settings for your kick drum is about 80 to 100 hertz. So this settings is also the same settings for your floor toms, okay? So your floor toms and your kick is about the same frequency settings, about 80 to 100 hertz, okay? Before we do some adjustments on the EQ settings for low EQ, let's listen to the default EQ settings so you have an idea of what the sound will be for this Simmons DA50, okay? So here's the default settings. Okay, so that's the default settings. Now, let's set the low EQ settings to the recommended settings. So the recommended settings is 80 hertz. So let me do some adjustment, okay? Okay, right now the settings for the default is 60. So the recommended one is 80. So let's do some adjustments. So 70, 80, okay? So that will be the recommended settings for your kick drums at 80 hertz, okay? Okay, now that the EQ is on recommended settings around 80, so let's listen to the kick sound, okay? So that's the recommended settings, and this is the default settings. The default settings is kind of flat, so let's, the 80, I think it's good starting point, okay? So let's set it up to 80 again. Okay, this is the 80 hertz on your low EQ. Okay, now let's move to the mid EQ. Your mid EQ covers your toms and as well as your snare. So your snare is also kind of included with your mid tones, okay? Okay, for this amp, the mid EQ at centered default settings, it is set to 800 hertz with a positive negative 12 decibel sweep, okay? Okay, for mid EQ for this drum amp, I would leave it to the default because the recommended frequency for mid frequency for your toms is about 300 to 800 hertz, which is the DA50 is already set to 800 hertz, okay? Okay, now let's move to high frequency EQ, okay? For high frequency EQs, this covers your hi-hat and cymbals, and also your snare will be also part of your high frequency, okay? Upon my research, the recommended frequency settings for hi-hat is 7 kilohertz, okay? And then for your cymbals, the recommended settings is about 10 kilohertz, okay? And then for snare, the recommended settings for frequency is about 2 to 4 kilohertz. Okay? Okay, for high EQ, we will focus on the settings for the hi-hats. Okay? So let's change the settings for the high EQ. Okay, for this drum amp DA50, the high EQ at centered default settings, it is set at 10 kilohertz with a positive negative decibel sweep. Okay? Okay, before we do some changes on the settings on the high EQ, let's listen to the default settings. Okay, so this is the default settings. Okay, now let's change the high EQ to the recommended settings. For hi-hats, recommended settings is it's about 7 kilohertz. Okay, so let's change it. So this frequency is set right now as default factory settings at 10. So the recommended is 7. So let's change it to 7. So 7 will be about this area. Okay, so that's the recommended settings for high frequency at 7 kilohertz. Okay, now let's listen to the recommended frequency. Okay, so here's the 7 kilohertz settings. Okay guys, now that everything is set to recommended settings, for me, I would use this as my starting or default setup. You know, you might also consider this as your starting point. So at least, you know, you have something to start on instead of having your EQs all over the settings. So it's gonna be hard for you to do some adjustments. So these are good recommended settings, you know, by the professionals. So starting from these settings, you can just tweak it, you know, and adjust it the way you like it. Okay? Okay guys, now that we are EQ'd to the recommended EQ settings, now it's time to play some jam. Okay, so we can listen to the recommended settings using the Simmons DA50. Okay, so also I just want to let you know that I am not a professional or an expert drummer. So when I do the jam, it's gonna be just basic drumming. Okay, so I also created a jam track, my own jam track. So this Roland TD17 comes with some jamming track, but you know, I'm not gonna use that one because it might, you know, Roland might go ask for copyright infringement because of the demo sound. Okay, but I created my own jamming track. Hope you guys like it, and let's do the jam. Okay. Okay guys, thank you for watching. I hope you guys like my sound demo for the Simmons DA50, and I hope you guys like my tutorial on how to do some properly EQing your drums. So if you guys like my video, please don't forget to hit that like button and also click the subscribe button and the bell notification, so when I upload some new video you'll get the notification. Okay, again guys, thank you very much. I hope to see you guys next time. Bye bye.